This is a little story about how I came around to build a V-twin AJS, which is a replica, an approximate replica of a world speed record attempt bike that was built in around 1929, 1930. But first of all, to put it into context, I ought to say a few words about my history with these overhead cam AJSs. Now, the first one I ever had was this one just here. And this is a 1930 R10. I've done nothing to it in terms of paint or anything like that. It's literally as it came, apart from the engine and gearbox, because when I fired it up for the first time, there was a clicking noise from inside it. And so I ended up taking it apart and having to remake bits of the crankshaft and put it all back together with new piston, rings, rebore, valves, guides, all the normal things you do. And the gearbox at the same time with new bearings and so on. Anyway, having got this one and ridden it around for some time, I thought it'd be kind of cool to get a 350. And one came up at a Bonhams auction, and I bought that for quite a lot of money. I think it was about 11 grand or something like that at the time, and started rebuilding it. And it was quite a lot of work. I had to remake all the gears and a lot of internal bits and pieces there. While I was doing it, I wondered if I could make one of these engines, in fact one of the bikes. I figured that I could use these L-shaped castings just here, these parts, and make some moulds to be able to cast resins from them, which is what I did. And so having done that, I could then make as many resins as I want and then cut and shut those to make patterns for castings. I then did a what if. I've got a lot of Velocet parts, Mark 1 overhead cam Velocet parts. And I just got these castings, the crankcase castings, and just spaced them apart with some washers in between to see if I could get a Velocet cylinder barrel, cylinder head and cam box on there, and I could. So if we now move on to this bike just here, this is the result of these musings in the workshop. So I could make a spacer to move the crankcases apart, and that's what's left of it. That's the shape of a crankcase basically from a SB6 engine. So anyone who runs Velocets will recognise all this lot up here. So that's a Velocet top end on basically a spaced apart AJS bottom end. It goes like a Mark 1 KTT and stops like a little AJS. By the way, it's called the AJ set because I'm giving credit to both AJS and Velocet. A lot of people say that there's never such a bike, but there is now. Right, so when I was building this one, I came across, I was already aware of it, but I came across there's an article in the Classic Motorcycle. There's a picture in here of this brute, which is a one-off V-twin that was made by AJS. And this is the first incarnation of it. It's not supercharged at this time. And it's essentially two of the first one we looked at, the R10 over there. It's two of those 500s, the barrels, heads and everything, on a 50-degree V-twin crankcase. And it was built for an attempt on the world speed record, which it didn't get. It made about 130 miles an hour. The world speed record at that time was, I think, about 134, 137, somewhere around there, held by the Germans. And they took it away after this and supercharged it. They put a supercharger on the front and had another go. And I think they eventually got up to about 134 miles an hour on it, something like that. So it didn't quite make the world speed record, but it's an absolutely stunning looking bike. So I wondered, could I do a similar thing and make one of these? And this was then the start of about a 3.5 year excursion into producing this one here, which is what resulted from that. I started really just, I suppose, thinking about how am I going to make the patterns for the casting. Well, in fact, I looked at castings from other bikes like Jap engines and that kind of thing, but there was nothing that was really suitable. So I figured I'm going to have to make my own. So I started on the pattern work for the castings, and it's quite a laborious process making patterns. You can only do a bit at a time, at least the way I do it. Now, this is a spare casting. I haven't got the patterns to hand. They're up in the loft in my workshop. But this is the drive side, a drive side casting. This is as they come from the foundry. It's what the spare one. I had 2 sets made of these, and that's the inner timing case, and this is the outer one. And that guy just, when it's all machined, bolts on there. The drive to the camshafts is essentially the same as these. So there's one gear, it's a 40-tooth gear that's driven by a 20-tooth pinion on the crankshaft. And instead of 2 sprockets, there are now 3. One obviously for driving the front cylinder, one for the rear cylinder camshaft, and one for the magneto out the front here. These are Velocet cylinder barrels, cylinder heads and cam boxes. This is running with Ducati pistons in it. I had to make the crankshaft in here. I managed to find a big end assembly, which is actually a Harley Davidson Evo with 7 inches, 7/16 between centres, that fitted exactly. It's a knife and fork arrangement, and but the rest of the flywheels and the main shafts and everything, I had to make all of those and put them together. Into the second gear, compressor in, contact.
Yay!
Well, it went. Here goes. Ready? Chassis, when I started, I had no idea what it was going to go in, and it just so happened that a 1931 AJS SB, no, what is it, an SB8, I think it is. Anyway, it's the Sloper, 500 Sloper, turned up on Car and Classic. So I bought that, and it was a complete frame, forks, there was a front wheel with it. I couldn't use the rear hub because I need a shock absorber. So the rear hub in here it's actually an infield hub, but they were used by Brough and they were used by Norton's because they've got a shock absorber in this side of the hub and the brakes on this side. So that's where the shock absorber is in the system. It's in the hub over there. The gearbox was the gearbox that came with the bike, which has obviously been refurbished, but that's all good. 3-speed gearbox with an externally mounted positive stop just there. That's from a Dog's Head gearbox, Norton Dog's Head gearbox, which I've recased. That's not the head itself. I had to make all that housing and everything for it. It was quite a squeeze getting the carburettors in here. As you can see, there's very little clearance between these and the carbs and the frame, and even between the tappets as well and the frame. It's quite a tight fit to get all that lot in there. So the oil tank, what I've done is this tank here is actually started life as a Royal Enfield toolbox. It's off a Royal Enfield Bullet, about 20 something quid off eBay, and there's tons of them around. And I've simply used the curved surfaces on here, one's hidden behind the carb there, all of this lot, chopped a bit out of it here and made a section for it for the filler, and then extended it slightly and put the back on it. The petrol tank, a similar issue really, where to get a right sort of shaped and sized petrol tank for it. And the guys in India have been making tanks for old British bikes for quite some time. And they do a pretty good job in my view. I know a lot of people sort of criticise Indian tanks, but I've only had good experiences really with them. And this started out as a tank because it had the right contours, particularly at the front and the shape of it, for an Ariel Model G. So I emailed the guys that made that and said, could you make me one of these, except make it 3 inches longer, get rid of this, get rid of that, move the fuel outlet to the middle here. The clutch, I made the clutch. It's basically uses Norton plates, but it's a 6-spring Sturmey Archer end on it just there. Yeah, there's another 2-into-1 for the valve lifter just here. The valve lifter which operates, if I operate it, you can see down here there are 2 valve lifters on there. There's a 1-into-2 just there, that's 1, and then 2 to operate both valve lifters. The exhaust pipes, I had to make the exhausts, and it's not so easy with these because when they're upright engines, the exhaust comes out pretty well horizontally or maybe slightly down, but with 50-degree V-twin it's pointing up in the air, so there's some quite tight bends in here. That's not my best bit of sticking them together. The other one looks a bit better than that actually if you come around the other side. They're made up of multiple sections and then just tacked together, welded. I get the bends done by a company down in Worthing here, Pipecraft. There's a bend there, there's another one there, another one down there, and I just tack them and then weld them all the way around and clean them up. It's set up with just straight exhaust, as is the original, but I've put some little muffler things in there at the moment to try and quieten it down a bit. It is still fairly noisy. It hasn't had a lot of road time yet. I've been up and down the road on it, but I finished it around beginning of December, somewhere around there, December 2021. And then it just poured with rain for weeks on end, and then it's been cold and miserable after that, and I don't particularly enjoy driving in the cold and wet these days, so I'm just waiting for some warmer weather to shake it down.